At 2:17 p.m., the judge froze the permit. The band at the ribbon cutting stopped mid-song, and 2 deputies started through the crowd while I set one thing on the table: a yellowed deed with my grandfather's seal pressed into it like a thumbprint from another century, 30 minutes before. That the HOA president laughed that paper can't stop progress. Yeah, that happened, and the cameras caught her smile falling off her face as the subpoenas came out, and the noise finally died down. Enough for me to hear my own breath. My name is Dave Harlan. And this is how a quiet man with a fishing rod and a stack of measurements outlasted a clipboard and a bulldozer. Most mornings used to start the same on Pelican Bay fog, lifting in slow sheets, coffee going lukewarm on my dock. Cedar smell riding the tide, my line whispering out toward the channel, while the gull on the piling watched me like we were partners. Cedar Rock Island isn't much, a stubborn 3 acres. But after my wife passed, it was the only place the world didn't shout at me. And then one morning, the world arrived on a buzzing drone. A camera eye hung there like a bug that wouldn't blink, and a glossy center console nosed up to my dock like it owned the tide. Heels clicked on my weathered boards. A bright voice that sounded like a smile said, "Good morning, Mr. Harlan. Melanie, Price Harbor Oaks." Board president, routine literal safety assessment. And when I told her this was private property, she lifted a page like it was a magic trick. "Easement notice, no recording, please." "You're in violation of our privacy policy," so I tilted my phone so she could see the red dot and said, "That's not how privacy works on my dock." She didn't argue. She walked my ground with that pen like a wand and pointed at my old shed. "Unauthorized auxiliary structure, you'll receive a notice." And her boat's wake slapped my grandfather's pilings like a warning drum when she left. Knock, knock, knock at 6:01 a.m. The next day, certified mail $250 a day for the unauthorized structure. "Sign to confirm receipt," she said under my porch light. Like dawn belonged to her. Non-compliance may trigger annexation review. And I signed just to get that smile off my steps. You know what I mean? I copied the 1986 county permit. I printed photos of the footing and roofline. I walked into the clubhouse that night with my hat in my hands. Because some habits stick. The board sat behind folding tables like cast members at a community theater. Treasurer, Arthur, avoided my eyes. The 2 at the ends scrolled their phones like breaking news was more important than my voice. I laid my permit down and spoke steady. 90 seconds later, Melanie leaned toward a little microphone and said, "Thank you for your input. Appeal denied fines will accrue daily." And that was it. No questions. No pretense. I walked out into the parking lot with that heat in my face we all know. The one that says they decided who you are before you opened your mouth. And I would have driven home chewing on it if I hadn't looked across the water and seen 2 flat tops rolling in like quiet tanks barges with an excavator on one and a bulldozer on the other, pointed straight at my island like it was an exit they just bought. I don't spend anger fast. I spend it like an engineer. I bought a calibrated sound meter and a cheap seismograph. A lux meter for the night glare dug out my old turbidity kit. Started logging numbers at the same time every day. Decibels and vibration and muddy runoff that turned the cove the color of tea. And while the pile driver hammered my ribs from the inside, I wrote times and levels and took photos. Like each page could be a plank in a bridge. I'd have to walk later out in town. The story became something else, guys. At the marina started adjusting their cleats when they saw me. A decent neighbor named Ben caught me by my truck and said, "Just pay the fine." "Dave," she said, "she can make my fence problem go away if you stop making a scene." And he couldn't look me in the eye. When he said "seen" the fines stacked on my kitchen counter, like junk mail from a meaner world. $250, $500, $7. And then an emergency bylaw popped into my inbox about penalties for any resident action causing project delays. 2 days later, a letter doubled my fines and backdated the hurt. That night, I pulled a dented green footlocker from the crawl space, the one that smells like oil and storms. And I found what I was hoping for, a brittle deed from 1909. A county seal so deep you can feel it through plastic, and a square note in my grandfather's hand that said, "The boundary ran 160 feet past mean low water. Confirm with Coast Survey notes." He wrote like I could time travel next morning. I took everything to a young attorney named Jordan Ruiz at the Veterans Legal Services office near a tire shop that still uses a bell on the door. She listened the way a good mechanic listens for a tick. She tapped the stack of fines and said, "They're trying to bleed you out. We'll start with environmental violations to slow the train, but fines aren't the fight they want." The deed is, and I told her I could put a finger on that line in the dark, she said. "Let's bring a camera," my neighbor across the channel. Owen used to dive for the Coast Guard. His partner Bree can make a live feed sing from a coat hanger. We mapped the island with a drone and tied the video to a GIS overlay. Rented a small ROV with a joystick. Pushed it out at low tide to the rocks, where my grandfather once taught me to set a minnow trap 20. Quiet minutes later, the robotic arm brushed eelgrass aside, and the lens found a rusted iron pin set into granite, like a promise. Bree froze the coordinates. Jordan compared it to a modern survey with the patience of a saint. The red line on her tablet matched the old paper, like two hands. Meeting Harbor Oaks. Stops here. Cedar Rock sits beyond, and the hotel they were rushing to finish was chewing ground they never owned. The worst morning came at 10:41 a.m. 3 weeks in the crane was swinging a concrete pile with a starburst fracture just below the lifting point. I yelled before my brain remembered to be polite. "Kill the lift, it's about to shear," and the foreman Trevor threw me a look and told his operator to keep going. So I ran, grabbed a heavy ratchet strap, looped it around a live oak and a temporary pylon. When the concrete finally let go, it didn't scythe down into the kid. Standing underneath it swung like a wrecking ball into my strap and scraped along steel instead of bone. The whole site froze. The kid's hands shook the way hands do when they realize they get to keep being hands. Trevor shut the site for 48 hours. Filed a delay report. 2 days after that, Melanie doubled my fines again and backdated them again, yeah. That's how it went. And that was the moment I stopped trying to stop them day by day and decided to let the story finish writing itself. Not out of spite, out of strategy. Because a quiet title case reads better when the other side has made their confidence permanent on camera. Jordan filed EPA complaints and a demand for runoff logs. The contractor never wanted to keep. She read the HOA bylaws. The way engineers read failure reports, slowly twice, and halfway through landscaping and trash can placement. She put a finger on a paragraph and said, "Here's the knife annexation of non-compliant literal parcels for the benefit of the community provided other restrictions are violated," I said. "That's theft in a suit," she said. "Courts call it overreach." Either way, you don't beat it with a Facebook post. You beat it with a map. And in public, it looked like I was losing the local station. ran a warm piece calling the hotel a community triumph. They used a long lens shot of my cottage and called me a reclusive holdout. Melanie live-streamed from the roof deck with words like eco and sustainable. Floating around her like balloons, friends stopped texting back. My granddaughter, Chloe, drove down with cookies and an exit plan. Move in with us. Grandpa, it's just land. And I told her the thing I hadn't said out loud in months. The place isn't the dirt. It's the promise you made to someone who trusted you to hold the line. The twist, if you want to call it that, landed in a tight sequence on a Tuesday. The contractor had a 3:00 p.m. certificate of occupancy appointment at 10:05 a.m. Jordan filed a quiet title action and bundled a motion for a temporary injunction with my logs. Breeze overlay, Owen's video, the surveyor's affidavit, the deed, the tax receipts, the glare photos at 1:28 p.m. A process server handed the lawsuit to Melanie like it was a menu she didn't order at 2:17 p.m. The judge's clerk signed the injunction and pinged the county at 3:02. The COO froze, and at 3:11, the deputies walked through the ribbon-cutting crowd, past the string quartet to the podium, where Melanie held oversized scissors. She kept the smile until the envelopes came out, and then she didn't have a place to put her eyes. Court day wasn't thunder. It was pressure. The HOA lawyer stacked binders and gave a sermon about community standards and annexation. Like it was a hymn, Jordan stayed at our table and said, 3 points, Your Honor, chain of title map, overlay proof on the ground. She handed up the deed and the tax receipts. Unbroken payments by the Harlan family. No payments by Harbor Oaks. No liens. No transfers. She set the surveyor's map on an easel and laid a clear overlay on top, so the red line met the water line. Like a ruler, then she clicked a remote, and the screen showed Owen's ROV brushing eelgrass from the iron pin, while Bree's coordinates sat in the corner like a clock. Jordan kept it to one sentence. That pin is where my client's grandfather said it would be. Trevor went under oath and said, Price told me the title was clean, and that the old man would be gone by the time we topped out. My final payout hinged on the COO, and you could feel the room's temperature shift. Melanie stood up, and the silk came off her voice. He's a bitter hermit. These residents are lazy. They don't appreciate what I built for them. Her lawyer tugged her sleeve. The judge didn't like being yelled at in her own room, and she didn't hide it. Here's the order. She said, Harbor Oaks trespassed. Annexation. Doesn't reach Cedar Rock, effective immediately. You are enjoined from occupying or continuing construction. The structure shall be removed and the property restored at HOA expense. Produce your financial records. We'll address sanctions separately. The gavel didn't boom. It clicked like a latch. Deputy Delgado walked to their table. Arthur's shoulders sagged. Melanie stared at me like I brought a storm to a picnic. I didn't smile or pump a fist. I just let my shoulders fall into place for the first time in months. That's where the satisfying part lands, at the hinge where the bully's voice gets smaller than the map. And if you're asking whether I should have pulled the deed sooner or let them finish to prove the point, fair question. Maybe letting it run cost the community money. Maybe my standing there saved a kid's life. Maybe both things are true. You know what I mean. I still fish from that dock. The ospreys came back to the old pine. The seismograph in my crawl space is finally quiet, and the pin sits where it always sat in granite, under the eelgrass. If you've ever dealt with a clipboard smile or a bylaw used like a crowbar. Tell me in the comments, was I right to hold the line the way I did? Should a board ever get to annex with fine print? Where do you draw the line between order and overreach? Hit subscribe. If you think the right paper should still matter, share this with the one neighbor who always measures twice and drop your take below. Because if we can't agree on a boundary, who gets to move it?